Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Joined today by one of the greatest overall drummers in the history of modern music. He started out growing up in cow country in Sacramento and was on the bandstand at a very early age in the Bay Area, playing drums and entertaining people. I have my suspicions as to how this came about, but we'll find out from him specifically. He moved to Texas. He started playing with a lot of, he was part of a house band, backing a lot of famous blues acts like O.C. Smith, Freddie King. But indelibly, what people want to talk about with Mike Clark is the fact that he was the drummer with Herbie Hancock on Flood and Thrust and the Headhunters. And I agree, that was sexy and that was incredible stuff. But the other thing that's important to note is that Mike was also very much a part of the Sly Stone attitude that pervaded the Bay Area during the early 1970s. As far as I know, it was one of the most unique and indelible times in our music history. And I plan on spending quite a bit of time exploring these things as well as the overall art of drumming and swinging the band. Mike Clark, welcome to the Jake Feinberg program.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate that. And that was thanks for the great rundown on me.
Well, I mean, I try to take the pieces, the juiciest pieces, but I also try to paint the artist for what they are. And I realized after doing some research that I want to make it clear for the record that that your job is to swing the band, and if that is in a bebop style, in a polyrhythmic style, in a funk style, whatever it is, you can do it. And you've done it forever. So, I mean, but at the same time, I don't want to rush this thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely the goal for me, in my opinion, for a great drummer is the guy that swings the band and really makes the band feel good. And then if you can add your own point of view on there at the same time, well, then that's gratis. But the basic thing is making the band really get real funky or swing real hard. For me,
it just, I wanted to ask you. You grew up in Northern California, but I wanted to know where did your rhythm come from? Were you a tap dancer, or did you do any dancing, or how did you develop like basic rhythm techniques as a kid?
Well, this is my father was a drummer, and he wasn't a real good drummer, but he was a professional at a mediocre, a little above mediocre level, and he quit when he was 19 or 20 because he realized he didn't think he had the stuff. But he loved jazz music, so there was always jazz being played since before I could walk, like right away from when I was born. My brain probably heard all that music, and because he'd play it all day and all night. He loved it. Everything, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, Gene Krupa. Later on, Charlie Parker and Art Blakey. We kind of found bebop together when I was about 8 years old. He brought home an Art Blakey record, not knowing what was on it. He just saw a drum set on it.
Right.
And when we heard Art Blakey, we both went nuts and went out, and through Art Blakey, we found Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and et cetera, et cetera. But there was always music. He had his friends over. He was a party type guy, so the house was always full of people. And they were always digging jazz. Louis Jordan, Wynonie Harris, Roy Brown, all kinds of stuff. Louis Prima and Louis Armstrong for days, this type of deal. Billie Holiday, he loved the ballads, soulful ballads. And later on, when Ray Charles got popular in the late 50s, he started bringing home tons of Ray Charles records. He'd play them over and over and over again. There was also a drum kit in the house, always, as long as I can remember. So when I was 4, I crawled over there and started playing. And I played something that was sort of like, I remember doing it. It's not like I can't remember it. And it was something like Gene Krupa type tom-tom solo, which when I was a little boy, that was the war cry of the times.
Absolutely.
This type of thing, And so I fashioned together something, and it worked. It didn't sound like a little kid banging on things. It was hooked up. And my father was like, "Oh, it's like that, huh?" That night, he took me to his friend's gig and had me sit in. And I was too short to sit on. I had to stand up to play the pedals and everything. And I played Sweet Georgia Brown with the band and took a solo on God House. And it blew my mind. And the band just blew my, I couldn't believe it. And, the audience all gathered around the drum set. It was like I say, it was a Gene Krupa kind of time period. You know what I mean? And so that was it. And I played this tom-tom solo. And I went nuts. And from there, I started playing drums in the house, playing the drum set he had there every single day, all day. And I'm a self-taught drummer. I taught myself a whole bunch of stuff. By the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I had turned into a child prodigy, and I was just a guest soloist in different parts of the United States. And we had a couple of big band charts, and I'd play China Boy or Sing 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 or Sweet Georgia Brown or some of these things. And then I'd play a drum solo, and then we traveled all over doing that. He was a railroad man, so we could travel for free.
Mike, I have to. I wanted to just step in for a second because when like now, I mean, you're still very active. I assume you have some interaction with. You're still gigging. You're still playing. When was the last time you saw a 7 or 8 year old be allowed or accepted to get up and play with a band? Does it still happen? I would like to know. I would like to know about that.
Well, I think it's probably still happening. I remember when Buddy Rich's grandson was playing with the band when he was quite young, and he turned out to be a hell of a drummer. And I think his name is Nick. And I see every once in a while a young kid with a talent like for the drums, similar to what I had, and starting off. But in those days, you could go into a nightclub, and you could take a kid into a nightclub, and it didn't bother anybody. Nobody even questioned it. Nobody even said anything about it. And it was not a problem. My father would, before he started getting me gigs, he'd be the drummer of the band, leader, $5 or buy the band and drink. They'd let me play. And but I haven't seen, I work, my schedule is pretty fierce. I do about 270 or 80 dates a year, so I'm seriously on the road.
Yeah,
I haven't seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's called survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah, I guess so. After all, yeah, indeed. So,
no, why at one time was our society so comfortable and secure that kids could come in and express themselves, and now it's sort of like this I don't want to say dark underbelly, but there's just sort of this projected fear that somehow it's not a place for kids, when in fact it's probably the best place for kids to actually learn and develop a street sense.
Well, I certainly did. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Doing that, and I have no idea, probably because the greed factor is so high right now that there's not enough time in anybody's schedule or mindset to appreciate a child that really has something great to offer. I mean, and especially in that setting. You know what I mean? So, I really don't know why, but it is definitely a different time. Although it's relaxed in other areas. I remember I went to New Orleans to play, and I played in the Blue Room with, there was this guy, you remember Jimmy Dean? He had some country hit out, Big John, about a big man that goes into a mine, and he saves everybody in the mine, but he dies, the mine collapses on him. Anyway, it was a huge hit.
Right.
So I got a call to open to be the guest soloist. I was about 11 at the Blue Room in the Roosevelt Hotel, in New Orleans. And so there was a band there led by a man named Paul Neighbors. It's a well-known band. And I met Louis Prima's drummer, Paul Ferrara, who was a great, great drummer. He's still playing. He's still active in New Orleans. He was one of the Louis Prima drummers. The other guy was Bobby Morris and, I forget the guy's name from New York. Anyway, who's with Louis Prima.
He had a stable, yeah.
So, Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I had a moment. So, but we went to this club called, forget the name of the club, the Paddock Lounge, the Paddock Lounge. It was a few doors down from the Famous Store. Now, I'd gone to the Famous Store and I'd sat in and played two-man that night after the Blue Room gig with a guy named Mike Lalla and another guy named Murphy Campo. And when I was playing on Murphy Campo's gig, which these are jazz gigs, Dixieland jazz anyway, but they'd mix it with bebop. It was modern stuff. Dr. John was playing the bass.
Wow.
He must have been about 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was funny because I told him I have the picture of him and I playing with Murphy when we were kids, and I thought he was going to respond by saying, please give me a picture or something like that.
Right.
And what he said was, I hadn't seen him in years. I don't really know the man that well. I said, hey, I'm Mike Clark. He knew that. And I said, I told him the story, and then I had the picture, and he goes, Murphy's dead. And that was the end. And it got game over, conversation over. I'm like, okay. So anyway, yeah. Well, it was like kind of an awkward moment. I'm like, okay, well, I'm out of here. And no doubt about that.
But Mike, but as you said, you were connecting it to the idea that some things are looser now than they were back then.
Yeah, I sort of got sidetracked. So they were taking me into a joint called the Paddock Lounge, and there was a man in there, a trumpet player named Octave Crosby playing, and it was an African-American group. This is in about 1955 or 4 or 6, I'm not sure. So they had me come up and play, same deal. He bought the band leader, Octave Crosby, a drink, bought him a taste. He said, yeah, get him up here to play. And we started playing, and the place was packed, and a cop came in and took me out on the street, took me off the stage out on the street, and said that he was afraid it would start a riot to have a white kid, me, playing with a black group, and he really lectured my father because we were from California and weren't aware of all of this type of thing at this level. And so, obviously, things like that have lightened.
It makes me so. I mean, listen, just for the record, Mike, I was born in '78, so most of the stuff, the music that I listen to, all was made before I was born. I feel that the era that me and you that we just adore in the early '70s, tolerance was in music was at an all-time high. Nowadays, in music, you can definitely cut across racial and ethnic lines, and actually it makes for just a much more world sound, and it's totally hip. But on a political level, I feel it's more covert and insidious racism now. At least before, if your father, if maybe your dad would have been dragged out and gotten his butt kicked or something, but at least it would have been overt. At least someone would have said, "Don't do that," and they would have put their mark on it. Nowadays, you don't know what people's motives are for why they want to take down, from a political standpoint, why there's sort of this have we really progressed at all since that civil rights movement? I'm not asking for an answer. I just think back then.
Right, I understand you're making an obvious. I understand. Well, I don't have an answer for that either. Obviously, that's huge. But I will say this: any kind of disrespect for the dignity of any human being's life is just absolutely unacceptable. No matter how small, how hidden, how, as you say, covert, or how huge, or however you want to put it, or how it's inexcusable and unacceptable in my world and in my sphere and in my mind. So I really don't know what all those issues were about. I'm sure it was financially driven from jump, and then it became, psychological and woven into the minds of the people. So I'm not sure. Herbie Hancock taught me Buddhism, so I became an SGI Buddhist, where there's none of that exists in the. So it all has to do with the hearts of the people, and if a person can't love his own life, I don't see how he can love another's.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, I tell you that, and I guess it's even more to the point. It's like if you're so insecure with who you are and you project that out on other people, there's no ability for progressive behavior, whether it's in music or in politics or in art in general. And like I said, I don't want to get too. I want to get. Yeah, we're getting a little sidetracked, but I needed to ask you. It caught my attention. I got really excited. In fact, I'm going on to eBay to buy the vinyl immediately because all I do is collect vinyl. I don't buy CDs anymore. And it was this idea. I said, "Holy crap!" He played with Vince Guaraldi. And you were part of the classic, the Charlie Brown Christmas. But what I wanted to ask you about, because obviously you're steeped in this stuff, please, if you would, talk about the significance of what I consider to be maybe the catalyst band that spurred a lot of jobs and excitement in the Bay Area and across the states, and that would be the Brubeck, Desmond, Guaraldi, Jader band. I was wondering if you were affected at all by that group, because it seems to me like they were totally a turning point band.
Well, actually, when I first heard Take 5, that was when I became aware of Dave Brubeck. And I was already, this is my own experience, I was already way into Art Blakey and all of these other guys, so it was hard for me to appreciate even Joe Morello. And when I appreciated him later when I found out how great he was, but it didn't knock me out the way the band swung like the other records I was listening to at the time, so I didn't become a follower or a fan, and I didn't pay much attention to it, even though it got really big. Now, Vince Guaraldi, I heard Cast Your Fate to the Wind, and I liked it, because Vince could play the blues, I could hear that. And I think Colin Bailey may have been the drummer on the record, I'm not sure, but it swung and I dug it. And that's all I knew about Vince. I was doing a lot of dates up and down California, Nevada as a young man, even in high school, and I'd occasionally open for Vince, and he had Bolisetti, a guitar player, and they'd play some type of bossa nova.
Oh my! You were on those? Were you on those? You were playing with those guys?
No, I played with Bolisetti a couple of times later, but I was playing opposite them, like I'd be in another band that would open for them.
Oh, that is so classic. What a great scene. Yeah, I've heard those records before. I didn't think you were on those, right? So you were on the same bill with them.
Yeah, I'd be on the same bill, not all the bills, but here and there, and every once in a while they play a jazz tune, and I dug that Vince could really swing, and I was like, man, this cat can play jazz New York style.
yeah, right.
And I found out he really had a blues feel on him. He could swing. He had a great 4/4 feel. I call him jazz 4/4 tempo. That's how I refer to it, the walk and bass and everything. That's the art to know how to do that.
He was also just based off liner notes and pictures. I mean, that guy was he was a prankster. I mean, he was great. He played with Charlie Parker, and he played on the East Coast. He did a lot of stuff. And I met him one night at some kind of a hippie bar. What was that? The Pierce Street Annex, and Jerry Han, I believe, was playing guitar. And oh dear, yeah. See, already, like Jerry Han. One of the most fiery, irascible, amazing players. I interviewed him a while back. I love that guy. That he epitomed you and him and Guaraldi. I just wanted to be in that scene. I want to be where you are at that point. It was just class.
Well, also who was playing was Denny Zeitlin and then George Marsh, a drummer, and they were playing some very adventuresome rock and roll, but with some really nice chord changes and stuff. And they were this is before the word fusion was ever started. They were already doing this stuff. And I was like, wow, what a great idea. Now, I lived in Oakland, so most of my stuff was all quartet, big band, trio, or funk, real funky music, because James Brown would come to Oakland all the time, and everybody was trying to play that kind of stuff, or we'd play Mercy, Mercy, or some Cannonball things on the funkier side. Hummin', Mercy, Mercy, what was the other one? I can't think. Country, something off the Country Preacher record. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
And Play Hard.
Yeah.
But Vince, so somebody asked me to sit in, and I sat in, and Vince Guaraldi hired me right on the spot. then he said to me, and then we were doing jazz gigs, trio jazz gigs. Ron McClure played bass for a while, different guys. I got Paul Jackson the gig, and a lot of people don't know Paul Jackson. The bass player with the Headhunters actually played upright jazz bass before he played electric bass. He didn't play electric bass till he was about 24 or 25. He'd been playing straight acoustic bass all before that.
That's mind-blowing because...
Paul and I,
because I remember...
Yeah, Paul and I... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I read that where when you met him, he was playing double bass. I mean, he was playing upright and he was playing bow, yeah.
And we used to play real funky stuff, and he'd play the upright bass. But like I said, when I say real funky, I mean we would play Cannonball stuff or a Lee Morgan song and kind of make it funky, or definitely Horace Silver, this type of stuff. Not the real, we hadn't gone over the line into the James Brown area yet, this type of thing. We were starting to. I was, because I was getting more gigs than Paul. As being a drummer, I was very in demand, and I'd play with electric bass players, so a lot of these
James Jamerson.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't want to rush. I need to know, we're talking like 67, 68 in that range? Is that where we are right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I wanted you to talk. This is so important, Mike, because if there's anybody who can articulate this is the beginnings of what I considered. It's funny. I'll get into this later, but this Jerry Han Brotherhood movement, this Ron McClure, what you're talking about, what you were doing. How would you describe that kind of music? It was acoustic, searching jazz. How do you? I mean, I don't want to use the word fusion because fusion wasn't there yet. What was that kind of music?
We were listening to Miles Davis and Tony Williams and Elvin Jones and John Coltrane obsessively, like all day and all night. For 4 years, there was almost no other music.
Right.
But because of the money and the audiences, they were trying to get us. They were starting to have rock and roll bands. Muddy Waters and those guys came out and did Newport, where they did a festival out in California. I forget which one, a jazz festival. And now they're starting to have rock bands. Those guys were blues, but then so the clubs were, even jazz clubs were asking, can you play some boogaloo? Can you play this, play that? So we didn't want to play straight funk like you heard on the radio, because we were jazz musicians. We could improvise, play changes, swing, and do all this stuff. So we right away married the two things together. It was just, nobody ever said to do it that way. As soon as, like, maybe we'd play the head of Mercy, Mercy, and when the guy would go into his piano or saxophone solo, we'd start blowing. It just seemed like we weren't going to play straight time. There was no singer to back up or anything,
Exactly.
So then a group, the Fourth Way, with Eddie Marshall and Mike Knott, came up around that area. Paul and I were getting very popular, and we were infiltrating all kinds of bands with our type of rhythm and understanding. And I was listening to Elvin and Tony and Philly Joe. Now He Sings, Now He Sobs with Chick Corea, Miroslav and Roy Haynes. Just whatever, every record that came out was huge. Then Lenny White, a friend of mine, who was a dear friend of mine, did Red Clay.
Of course.
And right after that, I started subbing with Bobby Hutcherson and Woody Shaw when he couldn't make it, so I subbed for him on those gigs. And I got Paul on those gigs as an upright bass player. So all of that stuff was starting to blend without anybody ever. We never verbalized it. Nobody said, get funky. The term, let's play some funk, that nobody ever said, let's play some funk. They would say, I made a mistake there, they would say, let's get funky on this one, but funk was not a genre yet. Nobody said, let's play some funk. You didn't hear talk like that.
When they said let's play some funk, they meant like put some backbeat in the bass and get it boogie woogie. They wanted people to dance. That's when they meant by. Is that right?
Yeah, they wanted people to dance, but we always improvised at the same time. Nobody played straight pocket like in a studio now or any of that. We thought that was square, and
right.
So we were always trying. So the blending of the two became a style, and then of course the record companies found names to call these things we were experimenting with. We didn't call them that, but that's cool. I don't begrudge that, but that's just how they handle things different than we did. We were busy trying to come up with some stuff, and plus, I think when musicians are young, they're trying to have their own sound, their own voice. They're trying to make their statement. So there was a lot of that going on too.
This is so. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to close with, but I came from the old school Max Roach, Philly Joe, of course, and this type of thing. I listened to those kind of drummers, plus the big band drummers. So, however, I was getting calls to play with funk bands, like they say, rhythm and blues bands, and I backed up a huge host of different famous artists that has hits out, and I had a knack for playing this funky stuff, and so my phone started ringing off the hook with that, and I was getting calls from people like Joe Tex, a soul singer, and Bobby Freeman called me once, and that's where I met Sly Stone, and he was playing guitar with Bobby, and they needed a drummer, so I got the call, and I played twice. I barely spoke to Sly. It wasn't like we really knew each other, but after each gig, he said, I was really glad to see you walk in the door, because most of the jazz drummers at that time played perfectly horrible funk and rock. They didn't have it. Even the great jazz drummers sucked when it came to this, because we were young, and we'd be like, there's something wrong with the way
I love it, man. I freaking love it, dude. I love it, Mike. This is great. I wanted to go back to Texas for a minute. Is that where, first of all, where was the house band that you played in? And talk about a couple of the real meaningful relationships with people that kind of became mentors to you, or that you eventually just were connected with your whole life from that scene.
Well, one guy was Delbert McClinton. When I got to Texas, I started playing a jazz trio somewhere, and in a club. I can't remember the name of it or anything. And Delbert McClinton was advised to call me because I knew how to play some funk, and he was playing mostly shuffles and blues, but he was starting to do James Brown and this and that. So a great drummer named Ray Torres, who lives in Sacramento now, he was the drummer on Hey Baby, the hit with Bruce Chanel. And Delbert had a band called the Straight Jackets with Ray and a bunch of guys, and they were the band that recorded Hey Baby with Bruce Chanel, and they played the blues. They played all of Bobby Blue Bland stuff, and Little Milton, whatever they could get their hands on,
Sure.
Howlin' Wolf, and the whole nine. And so I joined them for a while, and really, and they backed up. That band was then called the Rondells, because Delbert knew a guy named Ronnie Kelly, and Ronnie and Delbert were the band leaders, hence the Rondells. And they had a couple local hits out. And we backed up O.C. Smith, a guy named Ray Sharp, who had a hit out called Linda Lou, a great blues guitar player who was bad. And we played in this place called the Tracer Club, and another one called Carol Hall's East Side After Hours. We played a couple other clubs there that I can't recall the name, but I left Delbert's band. Ray was going to come back. I was temporary, and I stayed for about a year. At this point, Ray played the stuff way better than I did. I had too much jazz influence going on, so Ray came back to Texas and took over the gig, and I moved on with some other guys. And now I was hooked up kind of on the blues circuit in Texas, and I ended up playing with Albert King, Freddie King, Jimmy Reed, Jimmy Hughes, who had a hit out called Steal Away.
I remember that, yeah,
Maxine,
sure.
You remember Steal Away? Yeah.
Well, no, I know, I have the CD, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I remember there was that one classic track where he was.
Yeah, I don't know, baby. Maybe it's all in your mind.
Exactly. Maxine Weldon, do you say?
No, Maxine Brown.
Maxine Brown.
And I even she had this hit, Maybe It's All in Your Mind. It was a real passionate tearjerker, 12/8 ballad. And then I also played with Fontella Bath. I backed her up, believe it or not. She had a hit out, Rescue Me. And then I came back out to the West Coast, and I played in a whole bunch of what now they call it soul bands. So I was asked to invite it on. I played with Sam and Dave, and I wasn't on these bands for long, but I do a week here, 3 nights there, because I was playing jazz all the time I was doing this. When I got back from Texas, I got back from Texas in about 1969.
Right.
I went up to Vegas and worked a show for hated it and said, no, this is not me. All the bread was good. And then I came back and started an organ trio 4 nights a week in a club in Vallejo, California.
Yeah, that's the shipping area out right near Oakland or Bay Area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And and everybody would come to play with me because the place was packed, and it was an organ trio. We played everything. We played mostly jazz and bebop, but we played hard blues, shuffle blues, Jimmy Smith, this, that, whatever, And then the horn player started, and then it turned into a Sunday session. So all the time I was doing all these gigs I was telling you about with some of these soul artists, I would sub out my own organ trio to another drummer. There were some great drummers out there at that time. So, and I'll just close with this. I'm kind of on a roll because I just had a big hit in Starbucks. But
no, dude, I did. You keep going. I was going to say.
I also.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Are you still there?
Yeah, go ahead. You finish up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on a cell phone, so I was working. I went back and I did some gigs with Bobby Freeman at the Condor Club, which was the first topless joint. And this chick named Carol Dodo would dance topless in there on top of the piano, and it made the headlines all over the world.
See, that's the kind of strip bar that I want to go to. That's class.
Yeah, it was killing. And I stayed at this place called the Fireside Inn in Marin. That's where they put the band up. And in the couple of adjoining rooms next to me was Buddy Miles and Mike Bloomfield and all those cats. So after they get done doing whatever they were doing, I'd get off my gig, we'd have drinks together and talk all night. And Buddy Miles became a friend of mine. And I later, that year, 1970 was, I'm not sure, well, anyway, this happened in 1970. I recorded with Miles Davis's wife, Betty Davis, and she recorded a tune called "They Say I'm Different."
Wait, you were hold on. Time out for a second. Hold on 1 second. That. Now, were you on that album?
Yeah, I'm all over it. And Buddy Miles played guitar.
I thought for some reason Greg Rico was on that album. I'm going to go back. Maybe you were both on that album. I cannot wait to go back and listen to that tonight. They Say I'm Different is one of my favorite.
There were several drummers. There were 2 albums. I'm a Big Freak, and I think the other one was They Say I'm Different. I'm on one of them, like all over that bad boy. I did a 7 or 8 tracks, and I remember hanging with Buddy. He was playing guitar, and we became friends until he died. I was very saddened by his death. But most of the Electric Flag was staying in this motel right next to me, and that's how I met those cats.
So you knew, it's funny because local Tucson guy who just recently moved to Israel, really really sweet guy, is Harvey Brooks, who was part of the Flag.
I know Harvey.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and he still, even he would get up here with with the younger cats that the 30 or 40 cats that want to be where you are, that are here right now, and he would get up there and just play, just beautiful changes and great, just swamp boogie, just good swinging stuff. He's not here anymore, but there is I don't want to get too again. We can talk about this. I want to do several sessions. I had 2 questions from the Texas years. Did you ever cross paths with what they would be considered at the time would be the Jazz Crusaders?
I went into, there was a place, a jazz club in Texas, in Dallas, next to the Dr. Pepper plant. My father took me in there when I was about 12 or 13 to play, to sit in with the band, and it was them. And I didn't get to sit in because the show was the set was halfway in progress when I got there. And I think they were called the Nighthawkers. I can't remember.
You're right, the Nighthawks. The Nighthawks, yeah, absolutely.
But it was them, and they were burning, and I couldn't believe it. And they weren't just playing jazz; they were playing hard Texas R&B and butt-kicking shuffles. It was incredible.
Oh, dude, that is so classic. Jesus, that is classic.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I ran into, and I didn't run into them again, but Buster Williams played with them for a minute. He's a dear friend of mine. I played a lot with the bassist. And later on, like last year, I ran into Joe Sample and finally met him. And we were talking about doing some gigs together. And I met, is his name Winton Felder? Is that the...
Wilton Felder, yeah.
I met him, and I didn't. He was a very quiet man and kept to himself, so I didn't want to infringe. But I just told Joe, call me any time. I'm not even sure if he knows what I've done or who I am.
Right.
That out there.
It's so interesting, Mike, because those guys were, and I talked to a great bass player. You might know him, Bobby Haynes. Bobby played with them when they were the Jazz Crusaders, and I'm really trying to get to the core of this because, especially if you listen to some of their live shows, and if you don't have any, I'll burn you a couple and mail them to you. If you listen to their stuff from the same time that you guys were doing Thrust and Manchild, it is psychedelic tinged Texas funk. It's the most disgusting thing, and they were on fire. I mean, it was different from.
They were on fire.
On fire.
I have some of the Buster played me some of those tapes for real, and I have some of those records from the live. I did one live show. They were ridiculous, and they had a tune called Congolese Sermon. Do you remember that song?
I know. That's one I don't know actually. What's that about?
Oh man, check that! Please check that out. That'll blow. It'll dust you, man.
How many words is that? Congolese what?
Congolese. Congolese sermon, and it's
that's
like,
great. That is great.
Baby. I mean, it blew my mind, and I think that's one of the hardest swinging. Ridiculous. I can't even find the word. Look, it's choking me up just to think about it. The track, it just hits so hard.
Well, and I'll tell you the other one that, and you might have heard it, but if you haven't, I'm going to burn you. I have a live show from Seattle in '73, and Wayne Henderson starts talking to this crowd, and he's talking about how beautiful they are, and then the name of the song is "Treat Me Like You Treat Yourself," and I swear it is just like they're lassoing horses on the ranch. It's the most. They're on fire. I mean, Styx is on fire. They're all. I mean, I play that with my daughter in the car all day long. It is the most thumping, greatest. I mean, the point is that there were parallel bands that were on fire, and the intensity and the emotion and the optimism just bled through, and it's a testament.
Well, another thing too is Styx Cooper's drum sound at that time was like the sound that a lot of guys, not quite, but almost the sound that guys have been using since Steve Gadd and all those guys. It was a prototype for that drum sound, man, and all he did was take the front head off the bass drum and tune the toms down a little bit with a real crack and snap and snare. But man, I love Styx Cooper, man. He was an influence on me, that's for sure.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Oh man, he's still one of the guys. I mean, his secretary or his
Roy Mccurdy. What about Roy Mccurdy? There's another one, man. Cannonball's drummer.
Yeah,
he heavily influenced me. And I'm at Michael Wolff's house, who played with Cannonball and Roy for years. I'm in his house now. We're doing recording a live record with Mark Isham, John B. Williams, and Michael and myself at Vitello's, the place where Robert Blake either did or didn't do his thing. And here in L.A., I'm out here now. I just finished a funk record up in the Bay Area.
Wow.
And I came down here to do this record. But Roy Mccurdy's work with Country Preacher and his work with Cannonball and Nancy Wilson was killing. I mean, he snapped, crackle, and pop all day. And live, he was much more adventuresome than the records. He was like in between Tony and Elvin live, but he also could play the more in-the-pocket bebop thing, and he was funky as you... completely funky.
Yeah, it's so great. He went to the Eastman School of Music, I think, with Ron Carter. I mean, he was up there at that same time, and he did an album like you were talking about. It's actually with Joe Farrell and Sam Most before they both passed on, late '70s, and Bob Magnuson's on bass, and he's awesome. I mean, and it's just very beautiful, breezy West Coast jazz with flutes and percussion, but that's when I got turned on to Roy, and then obviously, like Black Messiah with George Duke and Airto. I mean, that stuff is just disgusting. I mean, that's out.
Oh man, listen, when I saw him live, I was with Herbie, and I'd never seen Roy live before. And Cannonball came up, and Herbie said to Cannonball, "How you doing, bro?" And he said, "I'm dying." We didn't know he was serious.
Wow.
And I became friendly with Nat Adderley. Hal Galper, who was still a friend who I love, was playing piano, and Booker, of course.
Right.
And Roy Mccurdy was bashing like Elvin. It was incredible. But he had that real tight. He didn't have that real open
it was what was happening. Right, what was happening? You had this, and I don't want to go into it right now because I got too many questions. That there's two other things I wanted to say, but before I did, there was the what I call the Bill Graham, Wally Heider effect, and that was just the idea of saying we are going to put acid rock bands on and bring white people in. We're going to bring Malo and Azteca in to bring the Chicano groups, and we're going to bring in the Headhunters and Cannonball's band to bring in some Afrocentric stuff, and then all those people are going to be together at a club, and it's going to be like America. That's what made America beautiful.
Well, that's what happened.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
I know. Well, Mike, I've been dropping the hammer on this for 5 months, and I've done. It's been Mike Longo, and it's been Mickey Roker, and it's been Pat Martino, and it's been you, and it's boom, 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 and so now I'm just a historical. This is what's in my head. Because everything is so, again, I know there's other good stuff going on, but you said it earlier. The greed factor is so high. Things are toxic. It wasn't like that in the early 70s. But I need to talk to you. There's 2 questions I have for you here. Did you ever, in the late 60s in Texas before you left, did you have a chance, I know you adopted an organ trio when you went to the Bay Area. Did you ever get a chance to play with organ grinders like Leon Spencer? Or did you ever run into Melvin Sparks, those Texas cats, when you were down there?
Well, I played with Melvin in New York a lot.
Sure.
But I didn't play with him when he was in Texas, no. But I will say that Melvin had the best shuffle I've ever heard a guitar player play in my life. He didn't even need the band to do it. He could do it himself. It was ridiculous.
No,
I knew Melvin quite well. But I didn't run into him there in Texas, no. But I did play with, I think his name was either Wayne Bennett or Wayne Henderson. He was the guy that played the guitar solo on Stormy Monday and Further On Up the Road and all that stuff with Bobby Bland.
Wow.
Back in the day.
Wow.
I played in some club, and he was on guitar that night. I didn't even know it was the guy. And we played Stormy Monday Blues, this is true, and I said, man, you played that just like the guy on the record. And he said, son,
I am the
guy on the record. I was like, oh my God. Because that was one of my favorite guitar solos. I don't care what the genre, jazz, whatever you want to call it, that's one of the best. I mean, he put that thing together. You know what I mean? It was like, but I didn't play with Melvin back then, but I ended up later on also with Bill Doggett, the Honky Tonk Man. I spent 2 years in Harlan playing with him 5 nights a week, which was a groove. He had a wonderful band, a great band.
Did you when you contracted out your trio, was your drummer Eddie Moore?
No.
Who?
No, Eddie was in New York all the time at that time. I used Vince Latiano, a great drummer who played with Azteca sometimes when Lenny White couldn't, and he also played with the Escobedos as I did, and he played with Cal Tjader for years.
Oh, Vince gave me your number. Yeah. Vince gave me your number.
I'm sorry?
Vince was the one that gave me your number.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he
played with, I'm sorry, he's a hell of a drummer, he's wonderful.
I love him, yeah.
And, and he, I forgot what the question was. But,
no, the question was, I was just wondering.
I would use.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And another guy, Gaylord Birch. I got Gaylord going. He ended up with the Pointer Sisters and became a very well-known drummer around the Bay Area. But he just got back from the service, and he was hardly doing anything. And I heard him play at a jam session. I was completely impressed and knocked out. So I recommended him for some high-level gigs right away. And he started subbing for me, and then pretty soon he just took off on his own. He was a great player and also a great performer.
Yeah, he was
visually.
Yeah, he was Elvis's drummer.
Elvis Presley.
Yes, Gaylord Birch. I'm pretty sure Birch was played with Elvis prior to, and then I remember him seeing him on the Opera House gigs with the Pointer Sisters. But this was pre-service, I think. I could be wrong. I'll check that. But I thought I was.
No, kid. Well, I know him very. Well, he passed away, but I knew him very, very well.
Yeah, you knew him better than I did.
Well, yeah, I knew him he was a dear friend. We'd practice together and try to out-drum each other and have drum battles all the time right in his front room. But I didn't know that he played with Elvis, for crying out loud. But I knew who he played around with the Bay Area because I got him most of those gigs. And then, like I say, he ended up playing with Santana. After the Pointers, he did a whole bunch of stuff. But what was interesting about Gaylord is he was a great jazz drummer, and many people just equated him with funk. And he was definitely out in the Tony Williams style, and he could really play. He had several. He was a complicated artist. He had many different things he could do besides, and he was a great percussionist as well. A lot of people don't know he could play gunga drums and really play them. You know.
Oh wow!
So interesting guy, volatile drummer, man. He would be back there just chilling, but he could explode at any time. And when he did, it was he'd really bring it. He'd bring that fire, that real fire. You know.
Can you talk a little bit about this idea? One of the guys that I feel deep inside of me on this trip that I'm on, I feel very much that I'm being pushed along by guys like Sunship and Billy Higgins. The one guy I wanted you to talk about a little bit from a cognitive or genius level was Woody Shaw. I know you sat in with him a few times and played with him. And I just, with him and Bobby Hutcherson, what was that like, and what kind of tunes were you playing, and the kind of venues you were at? Just break that down for me, if you would.
I played with Woody for about a year, and on and off here and there over the years. But I did about a year solid, and there was no solid work, but I was the guy he'd call when he did have work. We played at the Lighthouse in L.A. We played at a big jazz venue that we all love in San Francisco called the Both And Club.
Oh, yeah.
No longer
oh,
there.
Yeah.
And I used to go sit, Miles would play 5 nights. In those days, the bands would play 5 nights. And so I'd sit right in front of Tony's bass drum through several different incarnations of the Miles Davis band, the Ron Carter band, and the one with Dave Holland, and then later the Bitches Bruce, everything. You know? Which Harvey Brooks was on. Anyway, Harvey and I did some with Otis Blackwell, the guy that wrote a bunch of that Elvis Presley stuff. You know, we recorded with Otis Blackwell. The guy, he wrote Return to Sender and Don't Be Cruel and a whole ton of that stuff. Yeah, anyway, I think he wrote All Shook Up. But Woody, we play. He was a volatile person. He'd turn around and yell at you if you didn't like what was happening. He'd yell at you right on the stage. If somebody came up and sat in and just to sit in and have fun, and he didn't think they were playing at their peak, he'd yell at them.
Wow.
And but I liked him a lot. He was a good guy. And
he seemed to be. I mean, the skipper Henry Franklin talked about Woody and the idea that he would come into a session and all the music was right in his head. It was all in his head. None of it had to be written down. I mean, it was mind blowing that it was just the notes he knew the changes, he knew the chords, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. So I'm sure that I'm sure because of that level of cognition, he would get frustrated by people that he felt weren't up to task. To me, as I'm curious, as the drummer, you must have had just the supreme self-confidence that not to be intimidated by that. You just swung the band. I mean, is that how were you able?
Well, I had. I knew I could swing the band, but I also knew I'd heard him, and he was playing a lot of Joe Henderson's music. And I had actually played with Joe as well, and I knew Mode for Joe. I knew all of that stuff.
Right.
Inner Urge. I knew all of this music. So I could not only swing the band, but I could guide the forms of the tunes through. So I could crack the whip and really make it snap so that the band could, and they wanted that, and also I always played an East Coast style. I'm not a West Coast sounding drummer. That's why I fit in New York from the day I got there.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And so so he, was used to that, and so that worked for him. And he was real cool with me. He was glad I was there because I understood. But sometimes I'd play stuff. Wasn't so much the improv, but if I'd play a groove he didn't care for, he'd be like, "Don't give me that! Don't give me that!" You know what I mean? He'd turn around and yell, "I don't want to be hearing that! Don't give me that mess! Got to come up with something better than that!" You know what I mean? I also was friends with Billy Higgins and the skipper. And Woody and Sunship. I did a record with Eddie Henderson, and Chip and I both played.
Oh well, we're not going to get into that today. As much as I want to, I do not want to rush through. That's the bread and butter. The Heritage album, to me.
Yeah.
I mean, just put that in my body bag when I go down. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Hey, in my final, as we wrap this up here, this first section, Mike, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the upcoming Detroit Jazz Festival, who you're playing with, and what that scene, what you anticipate, and then we can talk about it when you get back and how it actually was reality. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, Richie Goods is the bass player who plays with the Headhunters. We have a new CD out called Platinum that's quite good. We have Snoop Dogg, Killer Priest, we have George Clinton,
wow,
Donald Harrison, Derek Gardner, Patrice Russian. We got a great group of people. And the record is really, I think it really sounds good. And I don't like every record I'm on just because I'm on it, but I like this one. So that's pretty much, so Richie Goods is a bass player, and he's wonderful. He plays both upright bass and plays jazz. He can play changes, whatever. And he can also play real great funk. I mean, he's really good. You'll hear him on this record if you listen to this record. He's really playing. And like everybody right away is like, who is that? So it's his band called Nuclear Fusion, and we're doing his original music. And it's going to be Richie, myself, Tom Guano, who plays with Lenny White and Lenny White's band, guitarist, great New York guitarist, a high-level guy. And a new guy on piano, and his name is Xavier, and I don't know his last name because I met him in a rehearsal, and hey, Mike, this is Xavier.
Right.
And we're reading the music, and we played for about 3 hours, and he split. Young guy in New York, and he sounds great. He's also really a high-level guy, really a great player. And before that, Richie was using Helen Sung on piano, who was quite good. So that's what's up.
But you're not going to, you're not playing at Baker's Keyboard Lounge, though, unfortunately.
No, but I sat in there once.
I know you did. I'm sure you did.
Yeah. No, we're not playing Baker's. I don't even know if that's still there. I heard they reopened another place, or so the story goes.
Mike, I want to tell you that I am curious to hear what the level of energy is, how big the venues are. If there was those, if you catch, I mean, the band no doubt is smoking. The question is whether the accessibility and the venues are going to allow you to connect with the audience the way you used to be able to before I was born, if that makes any sense at all.
You mean with the Headhunters or at the festival?
Well, when you get back from that and we talk again, I just would like to get your thoughts on how it worked out and some of the positive things that came out of it, because I really want to see the in the pocket music that you guys curated. I wanted to see it enhanced and I wanted to see it follow through. So I'm kind of curious to hear about some of the stuff that I'm curious to hear how everything goes.
Absolutely. Well, then we'll follow up on that. I'll tell you, it's a jazz festival, so it should be a self-contained audience. Right after I get done doing that, I'm actually going out with Scott Anderson on guitar and Jeff Berlin, and we're going out for 1 month. So keep an eye on my website, MikeClarkMusic.com, and see what's up there. We'll have the dates set by then. And I'm also doing the Indie Fest in Indianapolis with the Headhunters on the 13th of September.